Welcome to the Indie Opera Podcast.
This is part 2 of an episode recorded in the spring of 2020 that got derailed during the start of the pandemic. It features all the composer librettist teams to receive the 2020 Opera America Discovery Grants, which support composers who identify as women in the development of new operatic works and the advancement of their careers in the opera industry.
Welcome to the Indie Opera Podcast. This is Peter.
This is Brooke.
This is Walker.
This is Chuck.
All right, so those are our usual suspects. We are joined today by 7 amazing artists and collaborators who have all won the Virginia B. Toolman Discovery Grants for Women Composers. And we have with us, and I'm just going to give off the names, and then I'll read your intros when we actually do your segments. But we have Justine F. Chen, Stephanie Fleischman, who have won a grant for Seven Sisters. Melissa Dunphy and Jacqueline Goldfinger, who've won a grant for Alice Tierney. And Kirsten Volness, Susan Werbe, and Kate Holland for Letters That Will Not Get, Women's Voices from the Great War. And this is a wonderful selection. I've listened to everything. I'm really excited about the show today. I hope everyone's doing well. Shall we jump right in?
Go for it.
Comment, suggestions? No, okay. We are joined by Justine F. Chen, violinist, teacher, and composer of opera, dance, and theater, head of music at Pierpont School, and alumna of American Lyric Theater's Composer Development Program. And by Stephanie Fleischman, a librettist and playwright who has collaborated with Jeremy Howard Beck, Chris Cerrone, Michael Hersch, David Hanlon, Peter Nell, Julia Adolph, and the inestimable Justine Chen. Really excited to have you on. So you've won a grant for Seven Sisters. Tell us, have you collaborated before and how have you met?
We have not exactly collaborated before, but we're both alumni of ALT from different years. And then when we were developing our commissioned operas, we were sort of in the workshopping process the same year. So we would meet once a month. And we were both, our curiosity about each other was piqued. And after that, we spent about a year or two meeting periodically and discussing ideas until we rejoined on this one. It took us a long time to come to this subject matter, actually.
I was always super jealous of Jeremy, who had Stephanie's libretto. And so I was always really eager to talk to her. So we weren't in the same year originally for the Composer Librettist Development Program at ALT. It's like a year-long mentorship. So I was with a bunch of other composers and librettists, but I met Stephanie, who was, I think, the year after my year. And then we came together again for that year of the commissions. And so I didn't know her before that, but then I got to know her process and just her as an artist and a person. And I was super eager to work with her. And we had been discussing, as she said, various ideas, trying to think of one that would work for us. And this, I don't even know how it came up. So the subject is my family. Actually, I come from Taiwan, and I think I was talking about I don't even know why I was talking about my family with you, Stephanie, but maybe I had come from, the funeral was a year before, but somehow it had come up. We talked a lot about my grandmother who had passed away, and then just like different stories from my life were surfacing, and Stephanie got super intrigued about all the things I was saying. And so that kind of was the start of our discussions towards this opera.
That's pretty interesting. Stephanie, it must be fun to write someone else's life that you know.
Yeah.
And instead of sort of just making up a libretto, you have this amazing source who happens to also be the composer. What was that like?
I love working with sort of people who are living, but I mean, Justine has been really brave in this process because she's very unflinching about sort of the challenges in her family and the dysfunctions in her family. And she's willing to really go the distance. Like if I ask her a question, she doesn't know the answer, she goes and she talks to her mom, or she talks to a different relative and finds an answer. So it's been, and we've just really begun. So it's a great kind of sleuthing process. And for me, the challenge is to honor Justine's story and to be truthful as possible with this material that's personal and sensitive. And I think what brought us together on it is that her mother is one of 7 sisters. And when she started talking about the 7 sisters and each one of their kind of very different personalities, and the fact that they're each known as a number, and then she went deeper into that story, and one of the 7 sisters had been attempted to be given away at birth. I just was like, this is so mythic. Like it's documentary, it's real, but it's also completely larger than life. And I think that's what really got us both going on it.
Yeah, Justine, was it difficult for you to work on this? I mean, how difficult was it for you to go through the layers of history of your family and to be writing something about these people that you know so well and have heard so much about?
Well, I have to say that a lot of my, I guess, courage has to do with my deep trust of Stephanie, because I don't know how much of her work you know, but the opera that she worked on at ALT was about a soldier with PTSD, and it was a book that he had written, and she had adapted that, and she went and did lots of interviews with his family and himself, and there's just, I don't know, such a deep empathy that she had with that story, and they loved it. And all his buddies from the war, they came and visited, and they were so taken with it. And then there was another opera that she wrote that I'm familiar with, After the Storm, which is about people who stay for hurricanes and the stories.
In Galveston, Texas, specifically.
Oh, sorry, Galveston.
Yeah, no, that's fine. But yeah, it was written for that community. So again, it was like an engagement with those living people who had been through something.
And it just touched me so deeply. Like all the I guess the love and the care and the compassion that she shows her subjects and during the difficult moments. So I don't know, talking to her feels a little bit like therapy also. Discussing all the various, I've thought about this a lot, and a lot of it is confusing. And after a while, I just stopped listening because none of it made sense. I didn't grow up in that culture. So I'm just hearing all these kind of crazy things happening. I'm like, okay, that's like the craziness that they do. And Stephanie would always say, well, why? And I say, like, I don't know. It's just, I guess I should ask, And so it was actually good for me to just think more about it. It really helped me to come to terms more and understand the situation a little better.
It's pretty cool because the arc of the story happens at the funeral itself,
right?
And there are you look back at various stories over the different sisters. I think it's really beautiful, the idea of from the generation of your grandparents to your generation, the entire role of women and expectations of women are 180 degrees different direction. So to have that arc to go in one family, except now your grandmother was a very powerful businesswoman.
Super smart. Yeah, super smart and really savvy and independent and powerful. I didn't realize the degree to her power or her influence. I always heard, oh, she was in politics. Okay, she was in politics. I don't even know what that means. It's so vague. And then at her funeral, the former president of Taiwan came to visit. And I was like, who's that? And they're like, that's the former president.
Oh my God.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So,
It amazed
and
me
then
that she treated her daughters like that, like numbers and almost
you
objects.
know,
What's wrong?
honestly, it's like easier to keep it all together. 'Cause most people, they don't know all the names, you know. So you're like, oh yeah, number two. It doesn't seem so weird to me. It's just like an organizational principle, you know.
Is that a common thing to do in Taiwan? Is other families?
Birth order is a big deal, you know. Like they have the word for like older brother's wife is different from the name of like your sister, or like the sister of your mother, or the, you know, your natural, you know what I mean? There's like the hierarchy of who is related by brother or by sister, by man or woman, or mother side, father side. It's all very clear with the nomenclature. Like we just have aunt and uncle and that's it, right? But it's more stratified. So yes, it's part of the culture.
And what is the myth behind the Pleiades? Because I forget.
Stephanie?
Oh no. But there are like thousands of myths in all these different cultures. So we're still trying to formulate which one that we're really focusing on. I mean, we are just in the early stages of writing the opera.
Yeah, I wonder if we're in the earliest stage of the seven. No, we don't have a libretto. I mean, yeah.
I mean, I love seeing the Pleiades in the sky because
Yeah.
they're very easy to see. They're very recognizable. But every summer, that's one of like the top 4 that we always look for.
Well, what's fascinating about the Pleiades is that like there's a vanishing star, right? The third star is a vanishing star, and there's like a man chasing, like Orion. Someone's chasing after that star.
Yeah, there's a
And
lot.
so there's
Orion.
there's like a similarity in our story of like chasing after, like retrieving number 3. Did I sound heartless saying number 3?
Well, I can't wait to find out.
Well, why don't we listen to now? The clip we're going to listen to is just to get a sound world of your compositional style. So it's actually not a clip from Seven Sisters because obviously you're early in the project. So could you set up this clip for us?
So this is from an opera that I'm kind of in the late stages of. It's called The Life and Deaths of Alan Turing. And the librettist is David Simpatico. And we both met at the Composer Librettist Development Program. And this is a commission from American Lyric Theater, who sponsors that program. This is early in Turing's life. It's a scene with his boyhood crush, Christopher Morcom, who dies of tuberculosis. And so like, this moment is a very close moment. I think we made it up, but you know, it's just like a moment of tenderness, of young love and hopefulness. And the Christopher, right, he ends up dying, and then so after that, Turing wonders about the point of having a body. And so at the end of the opera, he ends up discarding his body. You know, he was chemically castrated, and so he eventually, people say that he committed suicide. This is like the idea, but in our opera, we say he uploaded his soul and he just discarded his body. So this is kind of setting up the ending.
Great. So let's give it a listen and a watch. This is ALT doing a staged reading of it in the.
Oh yeah, this is a workshop. This was a workshop with the amazing Jonathan Mickey as Alan Turing and the beautiful Andrew Bidlack as Christopher Morcom, directed by Lydia Yankovskaya, the amazing conductor who is also part of this project, the Seven Sisters project.
Great. So let's give it a watch listen.
Observe your common pine cone, spun in rising spiral, built on the memory of what's come before.
Here we go. Sanctuary, hermetic, divine, sanctuary, a virtual world where you and I alone together uncover, discover, recover, instruct, construct, contradict.
Machines of flesh,
machines so tender,
encased in prison,
in blood and flesh and pulse and need. Blood, sweat and pulse and
mingling breath, beating heart, throbbing of system of mind, of soul, transcending of lips, of mind, upgrading, proving, improving to live, to love, to shades of breath, of love, of mouth, of sanctuary, alone, together, covalent. For so many morrows, the memory of love, of flesh, of touch, of heat,
of flesh,
of touch,
of breath,
of love. Christopher, unsolved,
Dead by 1930.
why have bodies when bodies must die? While we live on as energy in memory. I feel you, Chris, as the years roll by. Your touch, your breath, your spirit, your mind. I feel you watching, my better half, my Christopher.
Oh,
It's gorgeous.
Thank you.
Lovely.
Thank you. They did such a beautiful job.
Such a passionate performance. I mean, it's so
Yeah.
it's amazing to see that in a
Workshop, right? It was
staged
just
reading.
a workshop. Yeah.
Yeah, but
Jonathan,
it really
yeah.
like the emotion really comes through so clearly. It was really amazing.
Yeah, we were so lucky to get Jonathan Mickey. It was very kind of almost an accident. We didn't even see him. He didn't even audition. We offered the reading to another person who ended up being busy, and then his agent, she floated the score a little bit, and then Jonathan really liked it, and so he was like, please lobby for this. And I was like, I guess so, and then he came and he was phenomenal. Like, not only could he sing everything, but he was such a smart singer and a great actor, and just like all the little moments you could just like figure it out. There was nothing I had to explain to him, like, oh, this is where the guy dies. I mean, I feel like that was like confusing for some people, what's happening when and what he should be focusing on. But he always got like that awkwardness, the weird Alan Turing awkward, like he totally got it.
I'm going to read something from Greg Moomjy. I'm editing it a little since we took a clip that none of us was expecting. The chorus work does a great job of evoking the ethos of the digital world of computers. This is something that not every modern opera that deals with the internet or the digital age does successfully. This piece is full of vocal color that serves to place the audience squarely in the 1930s, using music composed in imitation of radio jingles. I'm sure that shows up other places. But the orchestration is evocative and impressionistic in a way that recalls Ravel.
Oh, that's interesting.
Awesome. I love Ravel.
Yes, Greg is working us through all the major composers of operas in these notes.
Yeah, but to say you orchestrate like Ravel, that's like saying you're the best orchestrator in the world.
I was just talking about orchestration with my composition club, and I said we need to study Ravel if we're going to do this right.
Yeah, amazing.
Thank you.
We have a treatment that we are really excited to kind of dive in with. We have a strong sense of the style of the world. It will be highly stylized and quite theatrical. And right now we're in conversation with each other about bringing a director on board, because we both feel that can be really useful to have early on to develop the piece.
I just want to say it's going to be fascinating to me, because it is interesting when Americans go and start dealing with their family history, especially family history from another country that they are not used to. I know I found some of that dealing with my Italian and Transylvanian history. What you were talking about also kind of reminded me of what Lulu Wang had dealt with when she was creating her movie, The Farewell, that started off with Fina.
We actually talked a lot about Lulu Wang's The Farewell. Actually, it was very interesting for me to see how she dealt with all that. She has a different relationship to her family, though, because her Chinese is so good. I think she's fluent, so she's able to communicate with them in a different way. And
it is, but I mean, even though her Chinese is good, her understanding of the
culture,
the culture is very different, and that was fascinating.
So it's been an interesting process.
Yeah, it's like kind of looking into my Sicilian side of my family. It's a very different culture than American Italians, and it is unique, definitely. So I can't wait to see what you come up with.
Thank you.
Together.
I want to know more about your Transylvanian roots too.
Me too.
That's going to be a whole podcast. Okay, well, thank you, Justine, and thank you, Stephanie.
Since recording this episode, there was a workshop of Justine F. Chen's Seven Sisters, which was performed April 2022 at Manhattan School of Music. She was composer in residence at the University of Maryland, and she composed Quarantine Bitch, RSVP, a song, with text by Christina Kelly, commissioned by soprano Cara Dugan and WQXR, and which was premiered at the Green Space in December 2021. The world premiere of her opera Life and Death of Alan Turing is set for Chicago Opera Theater in March 2023. And librettist Stephanie Fleischman was just awarded the 2022 Campbell Opera Librettist Prize by Opera America, and is working on a new opera, In a Grove, with composer Christopher Cerrone. In 2021, she premiered Liminal Highway, a film and recording based on Christopher Sarone's haunting album for Patrick Eakin Young's podcast. She also premiered Dido Reimagined, with music by Melinda Wagner, this January at Dartmouth.
And now we are joined by Melissa Dunphy, a composer, podcaster, theater maker, and amateur archaeologist based in Philadelphia who teaches at Rutgers University, and Jacqueline Goldfinger, an award-winning poet, playwright, and librettist who is currently teaching playwriting and dramaturgy at the MFA Theater program at Temple University. Welcome to the show.
Hi.
Hi. I've been wanting to talk to you for a while.
Oh, good. Okay. I'm glad to be here.
Do you know vertical player repertory?
Yes. Yes.
You know Judith, right?
Yes.
So she's been talking about you a lot. So we've been listening to your work. So I'm really excited to have you on. So you've won an award. Isn't that horrible?
A grant. I mean, it's the first time in my life I've ever won a grant of any kind. So this feels really it feels really weird to me. Like, I've been telling everyone on social media, I've defined myself as an artist up to this point as the kind of artist that does not win grants. So, you know, yeah,
not
like
anymore.
I know. And it's kind of like weird because I'm like, I have to let go of that part of my identity that's like, no, I'm grant poison. Don't put me on your grant application. You won't get it. Like, now I'm like, oh, I got a grant, and it's a really cool one. Like, it's big. It's a big deal. So yeah, it's like this weird adjustment.
So how did you and Jacqueline meet?
Melissa also works in theater in Philadelphia, and I work in theater in Philadelphia. And there were times I would sit in a theater and I would hear a sound design, and I was like, I have no idea what's going on. But that's one of the coolest things I've ever heard. And every time I looked at the program, it was Melissa's work. So I was a huge fan before I met her. And so I reached out and I just asked her to coffee. And unbeknownst to me, she knew my plays.
Oh, of course. Jackie is a big deal also. Like, I kind of felt like, you know, she's an amazing playwright. She's, you know, won awards. She's been on the Kilroy's list. You know, I've been following her career for ages. So when she contacts me out of the blue, I kind of feel like, oh, it's like winning an award too.
But
Jackie
has she won a
Goldfinger.
grant?
Yes, it's just lunch, but it's a good thing.
A lot less money. Good lunch, but a lot less money. So we just started having lunch dates, and we knew we loved each other's work. She had some choral projects, and I threw out some text for her choral projects. And so it just built, but we wanted to find the right project. So Alice Tierney is really the right project for us.
Now I'm really excited about this one because the way you discovered this story is fascinating. And it's a murder that occurred in like your backyard and historically?
Yes. So the long version of this story has its own podcast, which I will briefly plug here. It's called The Bug House, and it's me and my husband telling, I think we're at 24 episodes and counting, the story of how we bought a magic theater here in Philadelphia from a pedophile. Yes, that's part of the story. You can go listen to the podcast. You will find out all the salacious details. And accidentally discovered treasure from the 1700s buried in the ground under our building, and became amateur archaeologists, a complete left turn from both of our respective fields. So we kind of went from knowing nothing about the world of archaeology, I mean, just sort of lay people interest, to being like super focused on the archaeology and the history of my building here in Philadelphia. So I was getting my PhD at the time in music composition at the University of Pennsylvania. And as I like to tell people, if you want to become an expert in a field, get a PhD in literally anything else, and you will want to procrastinate so hard on your PhD that you will throw yourself into any distraction so hardcore that you will become an expert. So it took 2 extra years to do my PhD because I kept coming into my advisor meetings and he'd say, "What have you done?" And I'd say, "Nothing on music, but I totally learned all this cool stuff about my building." One of the stories was that in 1880, a woman was found dead, hanging on a fence, like strangled and strung up on a fence in the rear of my property. Her death was written up by the police and by the press at the time as an accident. She had tried to climb the fence and her clothing had gotten tangled up and she had accidentally strangled herself to death and left herself hung upside down on the fence for a poor resident to discover screaming the next morning. Of course, and we have a lot of women here on this call, I put to you if you think that that sounds likely.
No, not a chance.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. That's not true. She was murdered, right? So as soon as I heard this story, I thought, wow, this is a crazy story. And I really want to tell Alice's story and get it right somehow. And
I'm surprised that they wrote about it at all. I mean, why do you think they even bothered to? I mean, if she was a dissipated woman.
Yes, they called her a dissipated woman.
So was it in like the part of the paper? Was it in like the police blotter part or?
Kind of, yes. Although I will also say my neighborhood in this period of time was basically like the worst part of Philadelphia, the worst part of the Tenderloin district of Philadelphia. So I feel like all of the well-to-do people in the nice parts of Philadelphia loved to read about all the robberies and deaths and murders and beatings and, dirty things happening in the dirty part of town so that they could look down their nose at, all of the sex work and German immigrants and Italians and all of these people, these Irish and all of the people sort of squashed in doing terrible things to each other. So I think it was that kind of sordid tabloid fodder. Interestingly, this is like 8 years before Jack the Ripper happened in London. Oh. And I wonder if it had happened after that, people would have been like, oh, we must have a serial killer here in Philadelphia, the Philadelphia Strangler or something. But instead, they did here's the thing, right? We think we're over that period of history. Right now, there are Black women, Indigenous women, sex workers who go missing in this country and in Canada. And, there are a lot of news stories coming out about it now. And their deaths are never investigated by the police for one reason or another. They go missing. I've read cases of like a woman's body found chopped up in a refrigerator and the police dismiss it as an accident. She must have accidentally died of an overdose. And someone who was with her just disposed of her body, but I'm sure it wasn't a murder, so we're not going to investigate it. So this kind of, dismissal of a woman's trauma and death happens today, like right now in the 21st century.
So who's looking into the sources for this? Are you both, Jacqueline? Are you doing research as well? Or how is that working, writing it sounds like there's probably not a lot written about this woman, except a few mentions. How do you flesh out a character like that?
That's one of the things that makes it such an exciting project, is that we get to build character, right? We get to take the elements that we know, which are very few, but very interesting. And it allows us to build a character that will resonate with today's audiences. And one of the things that we're looking at is we're not just creating one character of Alice, that we are creating multiple characters, different versions of Alice, depending on what the archaeology students find. So it's really about how we tell stories, what details we use to tell stories, when you find who gets to tell the story and what facts do they accept and what do they dismiss and what conclusions do they draw. So it's very Rashomon-esque in terms of how do we build the story of who we are as a people.
Right, so we're framing Alice's story.
That's what I want to know. Yeah.
We're framing it as, instead of just, I tell people it's like, oh, it sounds very operatic, right? It's like the salacious death of a 19th century sex worker. Gee, where have we heard that plot before? But the way we're framing it is from the perspective of 4 grad student archaeologists who are excavating the property in the 21st century. And they have a project to like tell the story of the person who died on this property through material culture and through research and through what they find out. But as Jackie said, it's like how does, a cis white man who's very by the book and sort of wants everything to be on paper, otherwise it's not true. How does he tell the story of Alice Tierney? How does a grad student who kind of doesn't want anyone to know that she put herself through undergrad by doing sex work on the side, how does she tell Alice Tierney's story? The truth is that how a story is told says just as much about the storyteller as it does about the subject of the story. And I feel like we're learning this over and over again, but it's really accelerated right now with things like the 1619 Project and, different takes on history, where we're realizing that the history that we think of as facts is not the truth, right? Because it's only told by a single demographic. And this is true at a macro level. It's also true at a micro level. Two people will tell a story two different ways, and it says something about the people telling the story. So that's actually kind of what I feel like this opera is about.
Yeah, it's great. It's great timing because, now because of this administration, there's so much talk about, how things are spun and how, what is truth, they're saying there is no truth, like at all.
Yes.
It's just,
oh my God.
like who's talking the loudest,
Yes. Didn't Bill Barr just say this past week? He was like,
exactly.
How will people look back on COVID-19? Well, the stories get told by the winners, he says.
Exactly.
Implying that he's going to win.
I know. It's insane.
Right. It's like mind-blowing. And it's, it kind of pulls the rug out from under you the first time you really think about that and think about whose stories got ignored and what parts of stories got ignored. Because, it feels very comforting when you think things are very black and white, but they're actually not. I like making people uncomfortable with art. So
girl after my heart.
I love the idea that, we went from a long time in history where only the very top of the society got to tell their stories and record them. And then it started to be that some people could. Now it's everyone has a chance to record their story. And it's just completely changed the entire way we look at ourselves. And I think it's really fascinating.
They let anyone make a podcast these days. Anyone.
I know, anyone.
I know, look at us.
So actually,
I'm not part of that.
Chuck. Why don't we listen to a sample here of your music? Now, this is not from Alice Tierney because it's still in process, but this is from another piece, Tesla's Pigeon. Can you just tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, sure. I at one point I wanted to be a scientist, and I'm still really interested in science, and I'm really interested in the lives of scientists as well. Nikola Tesla was a scientist who lived in the first part of the 20th century mostly. And he was a little off kilter. His profile has risen in the last few years. You hear a lot more about him recently. He was a brilliant guy. He invented alternating current power, the system of electricity that powers America. He got involved in a kind of a culture war, like a promotional war with Thomas Edison at one point over DC versus AC. And he wasn't very business savvy. Like he kind of lived the rest of the later years of his life penniless and destitute in New York City. But one of the most interesting quirks about him was that he believed that celibacy was a key to his genius. I don't agree with him here. I'm presenting this without comment, but I'm saying that he believed that if he had a girlfriend and had sex with a girlfriend, he would lose his mental powers, kind of Samson-esque with the hair. So instead of having female companionship, he fed pigeons, like regular pigeons that you see on the streets of New York. He fed them from the window of his apartment in the New Yorker Hotel in Midtown. And he loved these pigeons. In particular, one pigeon, a pigeon that was pure white, who came to his window every day, that he told all of his friends he loved as a man loves a wife. And one day this pigeon died, and he hallucinated a light coming from her eyes, and she spoke to him and he understood her, and she told him all of these secrets of the universe, and then she died, and he was destitute, like inconsolable. And it was kind of the beginning of his decline in life. So I took this story, and I do a lot of theater and a lot of Shakespeare, and I wanted to compare it to Prospero and Ariel from The Tempest, right? This airy spirit that only this one wizard who's marooned on an island after a war with his brother can see. So I basically cobbled together a bunch of texts into this song cycle called Tesla's Pigeon, which is sung by a solo soprano from the perspective of the pigeon, talking to Tesla in that moment when she comes to him before she dies.
And who is the ensemble performing in this clip?
This is Jessica Lennox, a wonderful soprano here in Philadelphia, who's singing the role of the pigeon, and the Curtis Symphony Orchestra.
cool pillow, a
Great. And
That was amazing.
Chuck, do you have something from Greg?
Why, yes, I do. The excerpt from Tesla's Pigeons reminds me of something Renata Scotto once said about mad scenes, that the quick shifts in mood are what makes them fun to play. Dunphy's music can really set a mood. In this case, the opening anger was extremely palpable, but what really drew me in was the abrupt shift to melancholy, which dominated the latter part of the piece. And for my part, I really felt I was hearing this kind of coalition of Bernard Herrmann and Benjamin Britten and Korngold with the orchestration and the coloring that you're using.
Thank you. I'll take it.
I mean, it's truly exciting and vivid. And then, I mean, when we get to the melancholy part, it's very Britten in that whole, you can hear that kind of English, more of an English style, and how he would use the voice coloristically.
Awesome. Wow. Cool.
Well, you write so beautifully for the voice. It's set so, I mean, the words are just set so perfectly so you can understand everything.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm very, I think it's because I'm an actor and I've worked in theater, and particularly doing a lot of Shakespeare and a lot of poetry recitation. And this is kind of what I grew up doing. So when I set words, you know, even for my choral music, like even my sacred settings in choral music, I always tell whoever's performing, whether it's ensemble or a solo singer, you know, it's kind of like, it's musical theater. You're telling a story. The words matter. It's not just, you're not just there to present harmonies, you know. And I feel like, and I'm sure the other composers will agree with me here, it's like a singer who can act is worth their weight in gold. I would take a singer with passionate acting over a singer who is technically perfect any day of any week.
And as a librettist, that must feel good to be working with a composer like that.
Oh, it's fantastic. Being from the world of playwriting originally, when people set my words to music and you don't understand them, I'm like, what's the point of me writing words? Like, if you didn't want words there, I could have just taken them out. That's fine. But yes, and she sets words beautifully to music, which, I mean, you can hear from that clip. It's like when I first heard that type of sound design in a theater show, I was like, who is this? Yeah. I have to find this person.
Props to the singer too for excellent diction, which is
oh my gosh,
yes.
Part of it.
Yeah, no, I call her, I literally call her my pet soprano. She has like first right of refusal dibs on anything that I write in her range. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, that cooing, that was the best cooing I've heard in a long time in an opera.
I loved that. It was really sweet.
Well, she's a wonderful actor, like Melissa was saying. Like that, it makes such a difference in the storytelling.
Are you writing a part? Does she have a part in your mind in the Alice Tierney? And
well,
you don't have to break that news. But.
No. Well, here's the thing. We are writing Alice Tierney for the Oberlin Opera Commissioning Program. So we can finally announce this. There've been a lot of frantic pandemic contract signings and not hammering out of final details, and contracts are finally signed. So the Oberlin Conservatory is commissioning this work. It'll be workshopped a few times over the next years. Actually, it's can I say it is so wonderful to have a long-term project looking to the future at a time when all of our careers are kind of in limbo because we don't know when we're going to be able to come together in person again. I am confident that by 2023, which is the projected premiere date of the opera, the pandemic will be well and truly under control. But yeah. Everyone cross your fingers and toes because we all need to make a living. So we will be working directly with Oberlin Conservatory students to create these roles.
Wow, that's amazing. And Walker?
Yeah, I went to Oberlin, so I'm very excited about that. That's fantastic. Yeah. Yeah, they're gonna love it. I'm just jealous that she has a ladder in her library. I think
Life
that's really
goal,
cool.
right? Life.
Yeah.
Yes.
The same. It's amazing.
Like,
that's all I want in life.
We built this apartment. This is the apartment that is the reason that we dug into the foundation and found all of that stuff. But because we built it from scratch, our architect says to me, how tall do you want the ceilings to be? Which is never a question I imagined I would ever be asked by anyone in my entire life, right? Like, this is some weird level adulting I'm not used to at all. And I did this calculus in my head, and I was like, 10 feet tall means I could justify a library ladder, and any taller the heating bill is going to be through the roof. So literally, so I was like 10 feet tall, and he's like, how did you come to that? And I'm like, library ladder. He looked at me like I had 3 heads. I'm like, no, that's literally the only reason for that ceiling size is that. Yeah.
I totally get that.
You want to see a little piece of the archaeology thing that we found? Okay. Check this out. This is a
Is that Alice's coffee mug?
Could be. You don't know. I don't know. Nobody knows. So I'm just going to say it is. This is actually, it's called a pipkin. You can see it has 3 legs on the bottom. That's so that you can sit it on the coal hearth of the fire to heat up yesterday's stew or soup. So it's basically the 18th century version of a microwave. We found the whole thing right at the bottom of our privy, and there are some weird, like, nerdy features about it. The legs don't match the handle in style. I took it to an archaeology conference last year, and it started an argument I've never been prouder in my entire life. So
I expect you
privy. Is that what you just said? You dug out a privy?
I dug out yes, the treasure that I found is 2 toilet pits from the 1700s, filled with thousands of artifacts from the era of the Revolutionary War. So see those Tupperware containers back there? That's what we're sorting through right now, but I have like 8 or 9 of them still to sort through and wash down in my first floor. So it's crazy.
They had Tupperware in the 1700s?
No, it's super crazy.
That's amazing.
Colonial Tupperware worth its weight in gold, I swear to you right now. Yeah, go listen to the my archaeology podcast if you're bored. It's
Do you have a guess as to why all this stuff was in the privy?
Oh, we totally know. I'll do it. I do it in the podcast too, but so it's the 1700s. There is no bubble wrap. There's no cardboard boxes. There are cobblestone streets and wagons with wooden wheels and no suspension. How do you move your breakables when it's time to move house? Answer, you don't. You throw them in the toilet. You throw all your breakables in the toilet. And you only take the really good stuff, or if you're rich, you can afford to buy crates and pack them with hay or whatever. But the reason there's so much in the toilet is literally like, screw this, I'm just going to throw it all in the toilet, and then when I get to the new house, I will buy new pottery from the potter on my block.
Wow. That's pretty cool. So
you should go over to her house. You could actually wash it. Like over lunch we washed a lot of the pottery so that like they can put it back together.
Yeah,
it's a great experience.
No, that's an invitation. Yeah, definitely.
Sorry, Melissa, I just invited them to your house.
That's cool. Everyone come over. We'll all catch COVID-19 together. Yay!
So thank you guys so much for coming on the show, and please hang on. We'll do a little wrap up at the end. But thank you. That was great.
Cool. Thank you. Cool. This was fun.
The world premiere of Alice Tierney is scheduled for January 2023. Melissa Dunphy has recently been named Oberlin Composer in Residence, and she has been performing as singer and electric mandolin player with her husband in the band Up Your Cherry. And librettist Jacqueline Goldfinger met Justine Chen on this podcast, and they collaborated to create Letters to Our Children, a short opera, which just won Best Music Video at the Paris Short Film Awards and is streaming online at the Decameron Opera Coalition Resonance Works. She also wrote a new play based on The Little Mermaid, which will be presented at Swarthmore Players Club this summer in Philadelphia. And new play Babel at the Contemporary American Theater Festival in Shepherdstown, West Virginia.
And now we're joined by Kirsten Volness, a composer, pianist, and visiting assistant professor of music at Reed College, and Susan Werbe, an independent scholar who focuses on the social and cultural history of World War I, working with artists to create performance pieces that highlight individuals' responses to the war using original writings from both sides of the conflict, and Kate Holland, who is a Brooklyn-based theater and film director and writer who centers her work around collaboration and co-creation with women artists. Yay! So welcome, Kirsten. You've gotten a grant from Letters That You Will Not Get, Women Voices from the Great War. Tell us a little bit about it.
Well, this piece started as a song cycle. Susan, who I feel like has been working on this project with her daughter Kate for quite a while now. It has had many iterations and manifestations along the way, but it's about telling the story from women's perspective about the greatest, the First World War, which was obviously life-changing across the globe. And I guess our first iteration of this piece was a 25-minute song cycle with 9 pieces written for opera cowgirls and Hotel Elephant, who you'll hear performing it. So it was 4 female singers, a violin and cello, and we decided that after writing these 9 songs together, we wanted to expand the piece to include a broader diversity of voices. So we have now texts coming from Malawi and from South Asian women and all over the place, right? Because it literally was a world war. And so in expanding the libretto, it's becoming an opera instead of just a song cycle.
Wow.
And it's exciting.
Now, I sort of skipped a step, but how did you two get to know each other?
Susan, you want to take this one?
Sure. Well, that actually is thanks to Kate's friend, Caitlin McKechnie, who is one of the founders of Opera Cowgirls. And Kate and I originally had this libretto and felt very strongly that women were underrepresented in terms of the history of the First World War. And they're underrepresented, and we continue to be underrepresented in anthologies, in scholarly conferences. But I'm glad to say that in the last several decades, mostly women scholars have unearthed an enormous amount of incredibly powerful writing that women have done and reflected on their war experiences. So we put it together, Kate and I, and it's all original writings. And one of the things that has been a challenge has been getting permissions, I should say, from people, from literary executors, from publishers, and that has been an incredible experience. And that finally all happened. People have been remarkably generous. They've been excited about this project. It's an unusual project to have women's voices only reflecting on the war. And we originally were in conversation with a women's vocal ensemble based in Boston who were very interested in the project, but unfortunately were never able to secure funding. And through a meeting at an event with Kate and Caitlin, Kate said, Caitlin is interested in this. And Caitlin said, I know the perfect composer, Kirsten Volness, and she would be so interested in this. And Kate and I, and you should take it from here, Kate, but Kate and I are total neophytes in the opera world.
Yeah, absolutely. So getting to meet Kirsten and getting to work with her has been such an amazing and unusual experience. You know, I'm used to working in collaboration on film. I've co-written a play and I've directed a bunch as well. And to have music be this other, like, central organizing principle of the work is so exciting. And it's been such, I mean, working with Kirsten is such a profound joy. First of all, because she's so wildly talented, but also because she's just such a generous, creative and very easygoing collaborator. So and we're sort of like, here's this crazy thing, and Kirsten's always like, oh yeah, okay, and then she comes back with something brilliant.
Will you be directing
Yes.
Yes. So now, as a director, sometimes you come to an opera, and it's sort of like the wonderful thing about working in theaters, you structure the beats.
Mm-hmm.
But now you're at the point, and people get frustrated with opera because all the beats are structured already.
Right.
So how is that working with a composer at this point in the process?
It's extraordinary because I feel like I've got pieces of it from her, but I'm waiting as we're working for some of the rest, and it's going to totally shape how my vision for this piece evolves. I mean, Susan and I have this vision and this relationship with the text. I should say that Susan's done a phenomenal amount of research, including a lot of primary source research. So, some of this is, has never really been unearthed in much of a scholarly context, let alone in an artistic one. We've been in communion with each other and with these women's voices. And then to have Kirsten come, and it's sort of like seeing a building in the dark, and then the lights start to come on, and you see, different windows light up here and here, and you're like, oh, this is the structure. This is what this is meant to be.
So it must be difficult getting an arc for this, right? Because it's all found things. So are you all working on what that arc is going to be, or who's primarily sort of keeping track of that? Is it a totally collaborative, or what's going on?
Yeah. Lots of conversations.
So is there a frame, some sort of framing device together, or how is it looking at this point?
For me, it's always been a journey. And I should say that Kate and I worked together on a multimedia theater piece with men and women's writings from the First World War. And we don't have characters as such. They don't have names like Alice and Jane, but rather they're archetypes. So there's the mother, and there's the nurse, and there's the sister, and the lover, and the ambulance driver. And it requires a leap of faith, I think, certainly for the singers, to say, okay, I'm going to go on this journey with you guys, and I'm going to trust that this arc, and the vision that Kate has, which is extraordinary, will take me from the beginning to where we're going to end up. People have been incredibly generous. I just have to do a shout out, if I may, also to Kirsten. So especially listening to you all, and it's so fascinating, again, as a neophyte, to the opera process, that Kirsten and I remember taking the train down from Boston to Providence with my libretto, Kate's and my libretto in hand, and saying, hi, and we had lunch together. And Kirsten said, well, what are you thinking in terms of music, and how are you seeing it? And I said, well, I just think of a cello and a violin, and I'd love it to be lyrical. And in retrospect, I'm surprised you didn't say, hey, so long, here's your hat, where's your hurry? Which you didn't do at all. And Kate talked about your generosity and brilliance, and it certainly came through that way, that it's been much more collaborative this time. On the other hand, we have come again with new material, saying, wow, we have this new material, and we're putting it in here, and we're dropping it in there. Can you do it? And it's always, sure.
So
why did you think of it first as a song cycle instead of an opera, and how are things going to change, and now that you're thinking of it as an opera, because that seems like a major shift?
Well, I would say, originally the song cycle made sense because it does show up as vignettes as an opera. It's not a typical narrative arc for an opera. And the way we've been talking about potentially staging it when we can actually have people in a room together again, it was going to be more of a roving performance potentially, where each scene might happen in a different space, or, you know, you could use the staging to kind of clarify the arc and where we are at any given moment. And so through this workshop process, I think a lot of those questions hopefully will be answered in terms of what needs to be added, connective tissue, or, you know, like, for me, I'm trying to figure out how to not just have 21 very short songs strung together, you know, like making it feel like more of a narrative piece. And, you know, there are definitely connections between songs that I feel I can find and bring things back here and there and create those musical moments that I think are important for a long form kind of piece. But it's very flexible at this point, I think, you know, being structured as 21 individual people's lives and, you know, moments.
Is the music going to be continuous, or is it going to stop? Is it going to be one sort of straight arc straight through, or is it going to be more numbers based?
I would assume more numbers based, with some probably interludes here and there when necessary. I mean, at this point, I'm just trying to set the text, and everything else will be ironed out in the workshop as to how it lays out in performance.
And are the same characters in the first, you know, couple songs as are in the last? So they go through the entire show, or?
Yep. So all 4 women that were there originally are still singing their main role, you know, their solo moments. And I'm rewriting those songs to include 2 extra singers. So now we have 3 sopranos, 3 mezzo sopranos, and a string quintet instead of just violin and cello. So the hardest part actually was the very first song, where all of the characters are introduced and sort of show up for a moment and then pass it to the next person. So I've been having to rewrite that song and add characters and lines. And so far, so good. I think I kind of came up with something, but I decided to do that part first because it seemed the scariest, or, you know, like the hardest task to accomplish, and maybe something, you know, I can use those themes later.
There's definitely, like, I would say there's a mix, right? Because there's characters who have more of an arc where you really see them start in one place. We have a young, very naive young woman who begins with this exclamation of joy about what it is to love your country and what it is to be young and in the summertime. And we go through the entire course of the war with her. And it's not all from the same writing. It's strung together from different pieces, even different countries. But as Susan was saying about archetypes, she is an archetype that goes all the way through. We have another character who shows up just in the first piece, and she might be my favorite character. She's her name is Kishan Devi. She's a real person, and her text is taken from a letter that she wrote to her father. And she's very young, and her father, he was in the Punjabi Guards, right, Mama? He was a Sikh, yeah. Right? It's just such a lovely thing. She says things like, "I'm not fighting with anyone, and we're running out of envelopes, so please come home." and we don't ever revisit her. She just pops up and has a little moment and then disappears back into the war again.
Why don't we take a listen to 2 selections from this now? Could you set us up for it's Right and Left and then Women of Europe?
Right and Left. Actually, both of these texts come from German women, if I'm not mistaken, right,
yes.
Susan? And the first one is a mother who is singing about her sons, right? And you'll figure out what's happening there when you hear the text. I would say that one is the most operatic of the songs I've written so far, but also very simple. Like, I've tried to write these songs as though they were almost folk songs or just coming from anyone's voice, which is interesting to try to convince opera singers to lay off, you know, like slow down the vibrato and just kind of be more casual about it, you know what I mean? But I think they'd sound great and do a good job with this. And so the first song is more of a lament, and the second song is a call to arms. It's from the Women's Peace Party, 1915, I think the piece was written. And it's calling to all the women of the world to stand up and fight against the injustice and the war.
Great. So let's give this a listen. First, we're listening to Right and Left, and then Women of Europe, from Letters That You Will Not Get, Women's Voices from the Great War.
Women of Europe, where is your voice that should be sowing seeds of peace?
Just wow.
Great.
Can I, just a little backstory about the first one, Right and Left. Kata Kollwitz, the German artist, wrote this, and there was an extraordinary, actually there were two exhibitions of her work, first at Wellesley College and then at Smith College. And there were excerpts from her diary, and this was taken from her diary. And we were very, we were very fortunate that the curator of the exhibition allowed us to use the text. But the backstory is that her younger son, Peter, came to her and begged her to intercede with his father, who did not want him to go off to war because his older brother was already there. And Kata Kollwitz agreed to that and persuaded her husband, and Peter went off to fight and was killed. And for people familiar with Kata-Kollwitz's work, it is extraordinarily powerful and very, very anti-war. And I would like to say at this point that everything Kate and I have worked on that started actually as a dance project and then the theater project and now this, that the two overarching questions that we hope people take away is why this war and ultimately why war. So we're not, while we represent all sides of war and how people either embrace it or reject it, that is really what we're hoping people will come away thinking about at the end of this.
I wanted to get Greg Moomjy's
Sure. The interesting thing about both excerpts here is the use of drones and repetitive rhythmic figures. Not only do they provide tension, but they also provide brief snippets of a kind of haunting, almost melody which draws the listeners in. It's a very unique way of composing for the theater, but it definitely has a strong dramatic connection to the text. At times, it was evocative of Eastern music, particularly the Ottoman Empire, which is on point because the Ottomans were major players in World War I. It's also great that Volness is collaborating with World War I historians for the libretto.
So just so you guys know who,
Greg.
Yeah, do you know Greg has been writing little synopsis or little feedback on what he hears in the music. Greg has been writing articles for us on our website. Has been we had him on a feature on the show a couple shows back. If you want to know,
He's our resident musicologist for
yes,
yeah.
Who wants to
and
know?
Critic. He's great.
So that was really interesting. That was written. That was just the cello and violin, right? So expanding that's going to be a lot of fun for you. Is there anything challenging about expanding it? Like all of a sudden you have 4 times more notes you can play all at once. So what is that process like? Rewriting after you've written it for 2 instruments?
I mean, I feel like I know where the moments are where I wanted more instruments the first time and more, volume and oomph and possibilities and texture, I guess. It gives you more opportunities for texture. But I think it just gives me a little bit more freedom, especially if we're moving things around. Like some performers could move to the next room while the other ones play this part, or, having more musicians helps deal with staging a little bit too. But I think at this point, I'm trying not to mess too much with the songs that I've already written. Like, don't go too crazy changing things if they're already working. And then for the rest of it, I think I'm allowing myself a little more freedom.
But string quartet also harks back to more of a European style of music. I mean, especially in the original cycle where it was violin and cello. These are instruments that people would have played in their houses and their families and made music together, and has that real feel of something that is coming out of a family. And I really I love the rhythmic drive in it, and the strong dance quality even to Women of Europe.
It's funny you should mention that, actually, because we have a collaborator who's choreographer, Troy Ogilvie, who is planning to work with us on the final staged version of this.
And
why do you feel like World War I is relevant to write about right now? It seems like there's other. I mean, obviously, 1917 just came out, and why do you feel like people are talking about World War I right now?
Well, I think the whole reason Susan wanted to do this project was the centennial of the armistice, right? It was to line up with that. And the American Opera Project is doing, they're the folks producing this, and they're doing a suffrage, there's like a program to commemorate women's suffrage this year. So it fit in with that in a good way. But I feel like, it's ironic that we're in a pandemic right now, because essentially that's what those people were doing too in 1918, right?
It's a weird, it's very weird.
Oh, it really is weird.
Really weird.
I'm trying to channel that energy.
We started this 4 years ago. Obviously, we not being prescient, we did not know this was going to happen. But I would also say that, it's so interesting. It's as if World War I in this country is the forgotten war. So we talk about the Civil War, and then we jump over to World War II, and then maybe a little bit about the Korean War, and then right into Vietnam and Iraq and Afghanistan. It's been so interesting. It was interesting. In the UK, what they call the centenary, there was four years of commemorations and observances, and it was art rich, and it was every art form. It was music, it was theater, it was dance, it was visual arts, where people explored all the different aspects of the war. And the last thing I would say is we are 102 years after the armistice. We are still living with the outcomes, the geopolitical outcomes of that war. So I think it's very important that we think about it. And I love the idea of looking at history through individual eyes and using the lens of art to do that.
I mean, the outpouring of outrage and action, protest and organizing from women over the past 3.5 years has been so inspiring. And what's so interesting is how easy it is to not tell women's stories at all. The default is not to tell them. So you see women through men's eyes always. As a woman, it's really weird, and it actually kind of deforms us because we only see ourselves, our histories, our beings, our thoughts in relationship to male stories, how we contribute to those. So it's fascinating to pry this war right open and let all of these women's voices out. And that's kind of, if we talk about a through line, that's how I see the through line, is conjuring up all these voices who've been sat on for 100 years, and nobody wanted to read their text. Nobody, I'm sorry, he's an amazing poet, but Wilfred Owen is so dismissive of some of the female writers, including Jessie Pope, who was supportive of the war in a lot of her writing. So I can understand for him why that was so hard. But she also writes a very nuanced piece about what it is to be a woman sitting at home. You can't go anywhere, and you're just darning or knitting this stupid sock, and that's all you can do. And your mind is racing with the thoughts of the person, your son or your lover or your husband who's out there, and you have no control over anything, and all you can do is just sit and knit. And there's another poem. So Jessie Pope was English. There's another poem that we found from Alice Dunbar Nelson, who's African American, who's expressing in a very different way many of the same sentiments, and no one was listening to them. I guess that's why they're relevant now, is because we're getting them now. So, God, we don't dare not do this. The history is being revealed. People are doing the research, and we're reading these for the first time, and they're so fabulous that even if it weren't a convenient 102 years later, it would be the perfect time to do them right now.
Great, and I'm really looking forward to see where it goes.
The premiere and recording of Letters That You Will Not Get, Women's Voices from the Great War, is scheduled for July 29th at the On Women Festival at the Irondale Center. Kirsten Volness is also working on a new piano piece, Ghosts of Cascadia. Kate Holland co-wrote and directed the short film No Monsters in Berlin, which featured Berlin-based Syrian refugees as members of the cast and crew. The film was awarded the Jury Prize at the Diversity in Cannes Short Film Showcase, as well as the Best Short Film at the 2017 New York Short Film Festival. With her writing partner, Malagedia, Kate is currently developing No Monsters into a web series. The pilot for No Monsters is presently in development as part of the Writers Lab Europe. With fellow writer Marlo Mitchell, Kate is currently working on a trans-teen sports rom-com, Offsiders. And Susan Werbe is currently working as the dramaturg for Letters You Will Not Get. After Letters' premiere, she'll be researching women's writings from the Spanish Civil War, which will hopefully become a performance piece in 3 languages: English, Spanish, and Yiddish.
Well, thank you so much for this lovely podcast. It's been a real treat.
Thank you so much,
guys. I'm just so pleased. The quality of the composition, the stories, the depth of the storytelling, and just sort of bringing to life all these incredible stories. All of these, especially today, seem to be just like gems, discoveries. You know, so it's really, you know what I mean. It's really, really very special.
Excellent.
So thank you so much for being on our show, and I can't wait to see where this all goes.
Thank you so much for having us.
Wash your hands.
Wash your hands.
Especially you, Melissa.
Always, always.
We hope you enjoyed our show. Please give us a thumbs up, consider subscribing to our YouTube channel or audio podcast feed on Apple Podcasts. And if you have any comments, suggestions, or feedback of any kind, please let us know by emailing us at comments@indieopera.com. Help us to make the future of opera brighter and bolder with a tax-deductible gift today. Donate to the Indie Opera Podcast on our website, Facebook, or on Patreon for special benefits. We'd like to thank Justine F. Chen, Stephanie Fleischman, Melissa Dunphy, Jacqueline Goldfinger, Kirsten Volness, Susan Werbe, and Kate Holland for their patience and being on our show. This episode of the Indie Opera Podcast was recorded on Zoom with co-hosts Walker Lewis, Brooke Larimer, and Peter Zepp. Our show is created with support of associate producer Chuck Sachs, Ashley Renee Watkins, co-host, Jonathan Blaylock, PR consultant, Gregory Moomjy, web correspondent, and Rosha Kriyan, our theme song creator. This episode was edited by Peter Zepp. Thank you for watching.